Oh yeah!
Up in the sky, what do I see? A UFO is looking at me. Lights flashing all around, bass bumping from the ground. Aliens grooving to the beat, hip-hop rhythms got them on their feet. Strange beings shaking to the flow, spaceships rocking to the show. I see a UFO flying high in the night, moving to the sound, everything's alright. Dancing the stars and neon light, hop to the beat till the morning light. I see a UFO flying high in the night, moving to the sound, everything's alright. Dancing in the stars under neon light, hop to the beat till the morning bright. I see a UFO flying high in the night. Dancing the stars and neon light, hop to the beat till the morning light. I'm the god, I rise and shine. In this realm I'm divine. Like the world was just a sign. Feel the power, it's all mine. All mine. Thunder claps, the sky obeys. In my hands lightning plays. Mountains bow, the ocean sway. I command night and day. On the God, feel the force. Every star on the course. Follow me on the source. Life itself, eternal life, love profound. Every beat.
How you like that pre-stream music? It's pretty good, right? AI is killing it. All right, good morning. Today is episode 58 of the podcast. Today I'm going to tell you exactly why time does not exist. Now, I've talked about this topic before. I've studied it on my own. I've experimented with it in my own life. I've experimented with it in other lives. ex- we've done a lot of things, a lot of discussions about it, a lot of open world discussions. You've seen us on Tinker's stream talking about it. You've seen us everywhere. Even my job is convinced now that time doesn't exist. Or if the ones that do understand what I'm talking about, but the other ones just are a bunch of stunads. So today, I want to tell you why time doesn't exist. Also, I was reading, I was listening to an audio book. I don't know, do you still call that reading? I'm not entirely positive. Because if you call that reading, what do you call it? Listening to a book? But isn't that like, I don't know, we need like a term. We need like a term for it. Um, so I was listening to this book by this physicist all about um, how time is like the ultimate illusion. It exists, but it doesn't exist at the same time. Yet, even though it exists, it exists because it's a factor of your mind, and because your mind creates reality for you, therefore time exists. However, time does not exist. Interestingly, this author pointed to a lot of Einstein's own speculations. For we know that Einstein, was the one who, well, him and one of his teachers were the two who came out and said, but obviously he gets all the credit. Came out and said that space and time are woven together like a mesh. And in a way, it's kind of true. Because what happens is if I move through space, I'm creating a starting point and an ending point. And the measurement between is time. How long until I did that? It's how long since I started to the end did that happen, and we call that time. Think about a common phrase like "good afternoon." Well, that implies that it's after noon, the time of 12 noon. So your right away, our verbalization of time connotates a measurement only. And also, speaking of time, I'll just divert for a second. You know what's funny is last week our episode ended like The Sopranos. It just cut off and was done. Which was pretty funny. But later on, I was thinking about it, and like a couple days later, and I was like, man, that fucking really ticked me off. Like, I was 5 to 7 minutes away from finishing the podcast. We were like finishing the last point, wrapping it up. I think I kept talking for a good like 16 seconds before I realized that everything was fucked up. And so, like, you missed that 16 seconds, which is like 5 sentences. And then on top of that, and I missed it too. The recording missed it too, everything. I'm just amazed that the recording held. I rewatched it. But um, it's it was crazy because I was thinking about it later on, and I was like, well, you know what? I was getting to the end, and I was talking about the universe and time and measurement and perspective. One concept in the measurement of time is eternalism, meaning that the universe is eternal. forever going, forever expanding, maybe even always was. But we know that that's not true because it had to have a start point now because of science. But even still, if it had a start point, it doesn't mean it has an end point yet. And so people have this idea of an eternal block universe that's literally just like the universe is like a square and it's forever growing out to a bigger and bigger square. And that's why, whichever direction you go in, you perceive the flow of time. Uh, but in reality, it's just a square. And I don't know about that only because most quantum mechanics these days actually point to the universe as being like layers of sheets of paper, just really thin and but spatial. So like that's how they theorize this. How am I going to word this in they theorized that the layers of reality for different dimensions are layered upon each other, like a thin layer cake. There's like or a little bit of girth and a lot of width. And you can go up and down, but you're really going out most of the time. The up and down is really your perspective from your starting point. But if so then it's like layered over like that, so they say it's easy to go and change dimensions, or easy in concept I should say, to change dimensions, but spreading out through the dimension is like a wide point. um so we got distracted by a notification. So um what we need to do is we need to talk about the spatialization of time. Anyway, I thought it was funny that it ended like that because, if time is eternal, then I couldn't be getting to the end of the universe and the time frame. And I was also talking about the timeline and everything of what's going on. And I was getting close to the quote unquote end. And if time doesn't exist, then there is no end. So therefore, the podcast just cutting out like that without having a conclusion is kind of like a microscopic um, reference to the universe itself, because just because our measurement ends doesn't mean that the whole thing doesn't keep going. So it was pretty interesting that way. I don't know if I'm framing it right, but in my verbalization of what I was thinking, but um, you know, that was interesting. It was an interesting thought frame. So so then, um, all right. So time doesn't exist. Time is a measurement all the way down from the nanoscopic element all the way up to the big cosmic universe itself. Time is a measurement. What we're doing is always measuring time. We measure time by the rotation of a planet, the revolution of the planet around its star, how long it's been revolving around the star, when did the star itself begin to form. Before that, when did the solar system begin to form? When the star started forming, but there was something there to get it all going. And then what happens to the then we measure everything down into our own lives. We measure how long you're interacting with somebody, how long your phone call is, how long you were sitting here listening to a podcast and not doing anything else, or how long you were doing something else while you were listening to the podcast or to the music or whatever the case may be in your situation. When did it start? But then you got to think of the microscopic aspect of it. How long did it take me to raise my hand just now, from the time my hand was resting to the time I lifted it up here. A few seconds, maybe 1 second, maybe a few milliseconds, but it took some time, right? But that doesn't mean that time is finite. It doesn't mean that you yourself have to be a slave to time. For it's all still your perspective. You don't have to live alongside time as if it's like the godlike rule, because it's only your perspective. Even there's a few milliseconds in between the times I say my words and they get, from the time that the words start to form in my throat and in my lungs to the time that they come out of my mouth. If you grab your throat as you talk, you could start to feel the muscles in your neck start to work few milliseconds before the words start to come out of your mouth. So right there, but you don't sit all day and say, oh, it took me, 5 milliseconds to say those words to you. All that time I wasted or used or whatever. No, you don't do that. That is perceived by your subconscious and placed into the flow of your brain as a part of the measurement. See, your brain is like this massively awesome computer. You can, it's a visual projector. It's a unbelievable recording device. The universe itself is an illusion, but not in like the Matrix. It's an illusion based on perception. I keep forgetting that I made like this awesome room down here and I don't have to sit like a fucking wacko. I may perceive that there's an open plane in front of you with a guy sitting there. And look at the image here on my screen. Forget about it. Let's give you a real visual cortex. Let's stimulate your visual cortex if you're watching live. If not, you can rewatch the video later. If you go and look at the image on your screen, what you see is a bunch of flames, Moses ducking his face from the fire. Now, look at his beard. To me, his beard is white. But to you, the beard might be gray. Look at his robe. Look at the red scarf hanging down on it. Or jacket, whatever it is. To me, that's like a darker red. To you, it might be just like a plain old red, or even a brighter red. It's all our perception. It's all about the way light hits your eyes, messes in your brain and stimulates the nerves there in your eyes and everything, and your receptors, goes into your brain, funnels into a video, and then plays back out for you. But you're not actually watching the universe here. You're watching, your eyes are looking at the way light reflects off of objects. And that light is being absorbed into your eyes, and your brain is playing it for you in your brain. Me and my hand in front of me, I'm not seeing my hand in front of me. I'm not seeing the camera and the keyboard in front of me. Rather, the light is reflecting off these objects and bouncing back to my eyes in a certain pattern that lets me know that there are texture and different things there and different layers of it at different heights and elevation because of different reflections of light and shadow. And then in my brain, I mesh those um, light reflections and energy reflections all together, and that makes, and then put it together in my brain as a video. Every human does this. Probably every living being does this. We just can't ask a cat or a dog if that's what they do. But we do know that, for example, dogs don't really see it in color. Mostly everything's black and white to them. On the other perspective, cats see a lot more than humans do at a higher rate. They're able to perceive higher frames of light than we are. So, what's happening is they perceive the world slightly different. When you look at your cat and your cat is just staring up at the corner. Everyone's cat does this. So if you have a cat, you know. Trust me, I had 4 my whole life. And they literally look up and just stare in the corner or stare to the wall over there. And you're like, there's not even a picture on the wall. So what the fuck are you looking at? Right? And then people start to speculate. Go on the internet. People speculate all day that your pet, your cat is looking at ghosts and whatever. They're not. Okay? They're not looking at fucking ghosts and whatever. Uh, Technically, if they were perceiving higher frames of light, they might be perceiving all of or little snippets of other dimensions, but we'll get to that. The what's really happening though is they're just perceiving things at a different light frame or different frame rate. So the light is reflecting onto their eyes differently. So, for example, maybe there's a cobweb in the corner, right? And to our optical perspectives, we can barely see it. It looks like a little wisp of dust or something, right? But to the cat's perspective, the light is reflecting off of this thing super crazy, and it could look, and it's looking at it, and it's like, wow, do you see those lights? That's awesome. It's like a disco ball. But it's just a little piece of dust. Now, I'm not saying that every time your cat is looking up, they're looking at dust. But what I'm saying is their perspective is different than ours. So they may be viewing the same thing as we are, but from a different frame of perspective, it looks different to them and captures their attention. That's what I'm saying. Not necessarily that they are or are not seeing other things. Also, we've touched on this topic before, but ghosts don't exist. Demons exist. In fact, that's funny about the thing about the beginning of this podcast is that was the first song that came up. Is it's a Gregorian chant for demons are real, and there's 2 versions of it, and that's the version I chose to play this morning for the episode of the podcast. Um, so, um, anyway, demons are real. Ghosts are not real. Demons, demons have always existed and throughout for centuries through people's concepts and thought frames and perspectives and things that they're seeing and stuff. So demons have always been around, um, but ghosts have not. And but demons will use ghosts as a fear tactic for you. I mean, they'll give you the perception that there's a ghost in your house, even though there isn't, and but it's really a demon. Demons are real. That's a whole nother thing. Whether they are our world, another aliens, uh, alter dimensional beings, that's a different conversation. That's a different conversation for another day. But anyway, oh, and ghosts only came about when photographs started coming about because people started, when you first had to take a photograph. I'm going to take a sip of this coffee. Let's hear from the Pressure Boys while I drink my coffee.
Hey yo, this is Cece from Pressure Boys, the best smoke on the East Coast, and you're watching the WARR Multiverse. Sheesh!
Sheesh. Ugh. That was delicious coffee. I had to drink that before we ran out of coffee. Oh man, I needed that. I don't know about you, chat, but I needed that. And so, anyway, um, demons are real. But again, what a demon is your perspective. So, for example, um, in Islamic folklore and Middle Eastern folklore, there's uh, the idea and the concept of the jinn. I love how we're talking about demons now. But the jinn are really genies. We call them today genies. They called them the jinn. But the jinn were not necessarily good or evil, yet they are pretty much the same as demonic forces reported in other cultures. So take that as you leave it. But those are also different time perspectives. And when I say time in this case, I'm referring to a moment on the measurement of our time frame. For example, just the other day, on Thursday, March 13th, we had a regular stream. But if you go on X, which you should all be following because how else are you going to get my updated news and let know when we go live and all that? WARRmultiverse on X. But, you know, Jewel, I posted a post right before we went live about how it was 2069 years since Julius Caesar died, was murdered. And we're going to honor him and venerate him as the god that he was. But he wasn't a god, he was a normal human. He was deified by the people later on and by his nephew and made into a godlike figure. They would do this all the time. The Greeks did this. It was the same thing. Christians do it today with sainthood. It's the same thing. You know, you're taking a person and making them from a man to a god man. You know, it's not very different. Um, so, but we know that Julius Caesar was murdered on March 15th. But how do we know this? And why did I celebrate it on the 13th? Well, because time is a measurement. And let's see. Time is a measurement and not a constant because it's all based on our own perspective. Scientists have done measurements on this where a person is, you know, given a task for like a certain duration of time, and then at the end they're asked to estimate which time, how much time had passed. And if they're asked at the end of, if they're asked at the end without knowing in the beginning that they were going to be asked how much time they passed. They always overestimated how much time passed. And if you were told at the beginning of the experiment that they would have to tell you at the end how much time had elapsed during the process, they always underestimated how much time passed. So again, it's all perspective, and it's all based on your information in your head. If you know how much time is passing, or if you know that at the end of it you have to measure how much time has passed, in your brain you're always calculating it down to the end of the objective. In our case, as human beings, that would be our lives. We know that we started at the beginning, so therefore there must be an end, right? I was born one day, so therefore it must end one day. I must die one day, right? But what if that weren't the case? In fact, it's not the case. It's all just a measurement. So, Julius Caesar, the reason we know he was killed on March 15th is because the famous oracle prophecy is written down still to this day, that Julius Caesar's answer that he got from his prophecy that he went to go see, because everybody from the lowliest commoner to the holiest emperor would go and visit the oracle to get answers from the gods. And he got the answer to beware the Ides of March. And at the time, the Ides meant somewhere near the middle, right? So historians, we just go, oh, the middle. All right, so it's the 15th, 30 days, cut it in half. All right, cool. However, in their time, they didn't really measure days the same that we measure days. There wasn't as many. There was also leap years and leap days and stuff like that. They had all different concepts. Plus, they followed, during Julius Caesar's time when he was emperor, they followed the Julian calendar, which the month of March wasn't even called March. So, could it have been that he was murdered on a different month than this month? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, most scientists now know that our measurement of time, which is based on the Christian calendar, is not really accurate. First of all, we measure time as Jesus' birth, which was 2025 years ago. However, he wasn't really born at the year 0. He was probably more likely born in the year 3 BC. And he was killed in the year, we say he died when he was 33, so we thought that he died in the year 33 AD. However, he probably more likely died, now knowing our knowledge, that he died in 30 AD, because you got to account for those 3 years that he was born before the 0 time frame that we're using now in our quote-unquote modern era. However, most scientists now who measure time and the rotation of the Earth and the chronology of the history of the planet, well, they don't really agree anymore on that time frame. In fact, it's entirely possible, because we also know that he existed during those times because of we know that these historical people existed during that time, like Herod and Pontius Pilate and all those guys, and well, I'm forgetting the guy's name, but the priestly class of the Jewish rabbis in Jerusalem at the time. All those people are historically recorded people. So we know that roughly when they exist. However, we know roughly when they existed because of our current measurement of time. Most scientists are starting to say today that historically it might be possible, if not probable, that Jesus was actually born in the year 6 BC, which would make this year, if we still follow the Christian calendar, that would mean that this year is actually the year 2028. In fact, but then wait a second, I just said that if we're counting from Jesus' birth as 0 and Jesus' birth was 3 BC, then technically we're already in 2028 BC, AD, and then we got to add another 3 years on top of that to bring us into 2031 AD, because we just pushed our time frame back 3 more years, our measurement back 3 more years. We added more time. But you can't just go and say, all right, everybody, we're just going to switch our clocks 6 years ahead. Our bad. You know, we messed up on the time frame about 700 years ago with Emperor Constantine, and it's all that guy's fault anyway. He saw some flying UFO and thought it was a Jesus cross and fucking stunad. And you know, and so so all of our measurements basically, and it's funny too, because I forgot this fact, but just the other day was also, I think it was March 13th actually, was the day that Tsar Alexander II was killed during the Russian Revolution, during the Soviet Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution as it was later known to history. And it's funny because it's known, even though it happened on our calendar on March 13th, it's actually known in their world as the February Revolution, because at the time they still followed the Julian calendar from Julius Caesar's time. So all of our months are totally messed up. It's basically just whatever we call it. If I decide that I'm going to move everything a month forward and now we're back in February again, who cares if I measure it like that? From my perspective, it's still February. It's fucking cold out. From my perspective, it's freezing out. It's raining and sleeting out. It might as well be February. Might as well be January 8th for all I know. And then tomorrow, when it's 65 degrees and sunny, and I'm driving to where I gotta go, and I'm looking around and I'm just like, gee, you know, it's fucking April. It's so nice and sunny right now. It might as well be April, you know, but it's not April. It's the same time as we're in now. But if I decide to start perceiving it like that, does time really exist? In the same frame of, you remember, what is it, Schrodinger's cat, where you put the cat in the box, is the cat really alive? Or is the cat really dead? Does the cat not even exist at all? Because I can't see the cat, so from my perspective, it could be any number of things. The measurement is not concluded. We know that from the time that I put the cat in there and close the lid, that they're in the box, and until I open the lid, the measurement is continuing on. But what happens inside the box is non-existent, because we can't see it. We can't perceive what's happening inside there. So the animal could be alive, dead, all of the above. It doesn't matter. So if you're looking at everything is from our perspective, then you realize that if life and time are just perspective, then all you need to do is change your perspective to change your flow of time. So, you know, if I wanted to speed myself up and move myself faster through time, make it appear like I'm moving through time. I might, this is just a thought concept, but I might imagine myself in a bubble. Let's imagine this from a bubble. If time is a measurement, and based on our perspective, it's flowing. You know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me get back to the perspective of the flow. The perspective of time flowing is all in your brain. Your brain measures, let's imagine, for example, you're sitting there at the beach. Nobody's around. It's just a beach, you on a chair, and the ocean in front of you, and the sun out there. There's no clouds. It's just a totally blue sky, and the only things that are there is the sandy beach, the ocean, you, your chair, and the sun in the sky. Totally looks like the sun is standing still. The water is there. Then you get there and you're looking and you're seeing the flow happen and you know time is passing because the water pulls out, crests, and flows back in, pulls out, crests, and flows back in. So it keeps doing the same thing over time. And each action of the water is a measurement. But if the water didn't move, you would think time was standing still. Nothing is moving at all. The sun appears to be straight up in the sky with no perspective at all. No movement, nothing. You don't appear to be moving. There's no clouds to measure how long you've been sitting there. There's no clouds to see moving that your brain can look at and see movement and track the movement. There's no ocean moving so that your brain can't see the ocean. Everything is purely still. Not even you're moving. From that perspective, time is frozen. Even though it isn't, but your perspective says that it is. Now imagine the same scene. You're still sitting there. The water's flowing like normal. All of a sudden, you're staring up at the sky, totally blank sky, nothing, and a swan or a bird, seagull, starts flying in, right? You look up in the sky, and the seagull crests over your head and flies through. Keeps flying. Well, now your brain started measuring. Before, there was nothing. Then, the light reflected off of the bird and into your eyes, and you were able to perceive the bird. But it's not just like it hit it once and hit your eyes. It's going back and forth 100 billion, million, trillion Google times. The light just keeps constantly going back and forth between your eyes and those objects. And each microsecond between when the bird was here to right 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 all the way in is the measurement your brain is taking on the subconscious scale. So I want you to imagine now you're sitting there, totally pure blue sky. Nothing is happening. You just hear the cresting of the water, and the bird begins to fly over your head. Flies overhead. You see the bird moving through the air, over your head, over the beach, and now it's over the ocean. That entire time, your brain was, each time light reflects from your eye, it's to your eye, it's like a little snippet of information, and your brain downloads that information and puts it into the video. And now, because that light is constantly coming back to your eye every millisecond or so, your your brain takes that information, because we know light is energy and information, and puts it into a video until it makes a concurring video. So you looking at the bird flying overhead, flapping its wings, going through, your brain is measuring each microsecond of movement and putting that together into the video to give you the perception that time is flowing. But it's not. This is where the illusion comes in. Time is a measurement. You're measuring each microsecond of the bird's muscle, the flap of the wings, how the distance is traveling, in which direction. Everything is all done on a subconscious level, projected into your brain through light waves and your own brain's stimulation, and shown to your mind as a video. And that video is the perception of the universe. Your brain is an awesome, awesome computer. A wonderful machine video projector device. It takes in the light energy and projects it out into your brain so you can perceive it as a constant flow. Otherwise, we'd be looking at some sort of block universe where everything's like block, 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 and each movement is very blocky and square, like old video games and old movies from back in the day. And, I'm going to take another sip of this coffee. It's good coffee. And the perspective is, your perspective comes from your information that you receive. For example, most people have on average about 20/20 vision. That's just the average. A lot of people, in fact, go outside anywhere. A lot of people have glasses. And those people that you're not seeing glasses on, a lot of them have on contacts. Corrective vision to make you more the average of everybody else. But that gives you a filter and gives you a lens for you to perceive things differently. Without those, you're perceiving the universe differently. You're perceiving everything differently. And without those, without your glasses, you're perceiving the entire universe differently than we are, because your eyes work in a different way. They absorb a different amount of light information that's reflecting into your eyes, either a lot or a little. For example, I have 20/10 vision, which if you look it up, it's better than 20/20. So what am I seeing that's different than what you or average person who's got 20/20 vision is seeing? How can you tell that? Because I can't see what your brain is seeing. And even if I could see what your brain is seeing, the light then reflects into my eyes and gets interpreted through my vision. So it's like watching refracted water when you put a straw in it and it appears to bend. It's you're always looking through the universe as a filter. It's never the same. So it's always the flow of time is part of the illusion, and we need it to look like a flow. In fact, it was probably adaptively advantageous to early human species to be able to perceive time in a flow like this, because you needed to be able to coordinate your eye with the deer that you're trying to hunt in order to eat and survive. So the ones who were able to perceive time better and depth perception better were probably the beings that survived in the very, very beginning and early days. you know, 200,000 or plus years ago. And so all of that taken into effect, you got to remember our brains are passing down things. We may not pass down 100% information, but we do pass down information from gene to gene and species to species. It's not, we may not know exactly what our ancestors knew and from their perspective and what they saw and remembered and all of that, but we can gauge the idea of what they knew, and we can also know for a scientific fact that some of those things translate into our genetics. And that translation into our genetics is what's passed down to us. For example, it's why we have we don't have a tail anymore. It was less advantageous, and the ones who survived didn't have the tail and passed that down. And we don't we don't think about having a tail now. Our subconscious still knows about it. For example, if you look at a person in the womb growing, in the very early stages, we all have a tail. Every human being has a tail. But then our genes start to take effect and change our genetic processing, and it remembers that we don't need the tail anymore. We adapted. And some people are born with a mutation, even to this day, that they are born with tails still. Could it be that that person's gene that says you don't need to have a tail anymore was not active or non-existent or some form or something in some form? Yeah, that's exactly what that means. It means that this person was born with the tail because their genes forgot that it wasn't adaptively advantageous anymore. However, it's adaptively advantageous in the religious sense because this person was worshipped as the reincarnation of the divine monkey god, Rama, in Hinduism. So there's a perspective all there that shows, what you're doing and what your time frame is and everything. Um, Everything is based on your perspective, but even down to the nanoscopic scale of your genes. Your genes even have a perspective, and we call that adaptation, mutation. Your genes realize, hey, I have this new perspective on how I'm going to do things, and I no longer need a tail. It's the universe is an amazing place, but it's all how we perceive it. For example, I talked about one time, we had, I talked about how, well, a lot of times, about, I talked about how the universe is based on our planet's perspective, our measurement. For example, 1 year on Earth is 2 years on Mars. But if I was born on Mars to measure the universe, I might, think that the universe was not 13.6 billion years ago, but half that, because I have double the rotation, double the length of the revolution, I mean. So who's to say that I wouldn't measure my year as one, as we do on Earth years, but I would measure it as one because that's my concept. That's why mathematically time is the same all around, because from our perspective, I'm measuring time as a constant from my perspective. This is why you can prove time existing mathematically. This is how Einstein was able to do it. And Einstein was a genius in the thought experiment process. He used the thought experiment as a just a wonderful way to think about things. He would sit there. He's famous for telling people about how he would just imagine himself on a single, just sitting there like a cartoon character on a single beam of light and just shooting across the universe. What would he see from that perspective? It's the same thing. But he would see the universe fly by like that, because light is all around. He's traveling at the speed of light. He might reach the end of the universe in a few milliseconds. It all depends on your perspective. And from light's perspective, light is the start of the universe, because you need the light to begin your measurement. You say, well, the sun's always there, but if you think about it, we look at the sun through a telescope or some sort of thing like that. When you look through it through a telescope, you're now looking at it closer. Your perspective has changed. Your time concept has changed. So now you're able to measure the flow of time as being from when the light started at the source, not from our perspective all the way on the planet, but from however much closer the telescope was able to get you. You're at a different perspective, yet you know that the light beam started at the sun and started ejecting out towards you and towards your eyes. But it happened sooner because you're looking at it from a closer perspective. So from your perspective, time has just happened sooner because I'm looking at it from a light perspective. Now, we also measure time based on the rotation of our planet and our planet's revolution around the sun. In the ancient days, we also measured time by the moon calendars also, in a multi-concept of that. I appreciate you with that follow. I don't know why I'm not hearing the notification in my ear. What the fuck? Anyway, so they when you're sitting there and you're looking at everything, should I word this next part? Let's see. The taken from our perspective, measuring the universe is our rotation around the sun, our revolution around the sun, and our rotation of the planet on its axis. However, we also know that the rotation isn't constant either. Sometimes it's a little slower, sometimes it's a little faster. It also depends on how close we are to the sun itself. For example, you ever in the summertime and here and you're looking out and you think the day has just flown by? It kind of has, because you're literally flying by. Not only that, but you're literally leaning closer to the sun. So it's you're like tilted this way. Look at a wobbling spin top. When it starts to wobble and lose some of its momentum, it takes a little bit longer to go around. But if you give it a little more force, like the force of gravity would do from pulling it around the star, it's going to spin a little faster. So when we get closer and you're to the star and you perceive time as going a little bit faster, that's because it is going a little bit faster, because it's being influenced by the force of gravity. If you take a clock and go all the way up onto the top of a mountain, and I go all the way down to the seafloor, and then we both come meet again, our clocks aren't going to be exactly right because the force of gravity is different in each area. It's the same thing on another planet. If I were to go to, Gleason 452b or something, the mega Earth, if I were to go there and it's just like Earth but gargantuan size, well, I wouldn't measure time that way. Gravity would be a lot stronger. The rotation of the Earth would be a lot either slower or faster. And its revolution around its planet would be totally different. So if I were born on that planet, I'm not going to be measuring time the same way we do on Earth. Yes, mathematically, it is a constant for me. And in my perception, time is a constant, but in reality, it's not, because it's based on where you are in the universe and when you consciously started perceiving the measurement. Because when you start perceiving the measurement, that's the beginning of your clock. You know, if I were to go and do laundry, think about putting your laundry in the machine, right? You put it in the machine. That's the start of it. How long did I sit there and put my clothes in the machine and started going from the moment I walked down there and opened up the lid and started putting in my clothes, closed it and pressed the button for it to start. How long did that take? That's your measurement right there. It starts and it ends, and you're perceiving the beginning as from when you lifted up the lid. But what if your laundry is in the basement and I started perceiving how long it took me to do it from when I started walking down the stairs? Well, you know, it's like, what if I was making pasta and I started measuring how long it was cooking from when the water started boiling and I put the noodles into the water? But what if I started measuring my time from when I first turned it on? Well, the pasta, if I put the pasta in when I first turn it on, the water is going to be ice cold and it's not going to be boiled. It's not, it doesn't work that way. But from my perspective, I started measuring it at the beginning. What do you mean? You said 9 minutes. I put it in, turned it on, and 9 minutes it was al dente. You know, and so what do you mean? Well, but you have to know to measure it right from the correct starting point. That's what we're getting at here. Though there is the correct starting point. But for mathematically, the starting point is always constant from my perspective. So if I go to another planet, the universe might not be 13.6 billion years old. It might be 15 billion years old. It might be 20 billion years old. There was an article that came out that, and it was all over CNN too. And I remember I talked with Tinker about it, and we even looked it up. You know, because they measured this planet as being 28 billion light years away. Well, the first thing you say is, wait, how's that possible? because the universe is only 13.6 billion years old, which means that the furthest star would be 13.6 billion years away measured at the speed of light. So, how is that possible? Well, we ended up looking it up, and these guys were Stunads, and they were purposely mismeasuring it. They were saying, it's 14 billion years and 14 billion years back, about, whatever. So basically what they're saying is it's just the closest star. And, well, if you measure it as not traveling at the speed of light, and you measure it as traveling as regular conventional rockets, it'll take 28 billion years to get there, so it's 28 billion years away. That's not accurate science. That's not accurate science at all. You need to have a constant measurement mathematically. One more point on the mathematical concept of it is, 0 is not a number, yet it is in a way, because you can't measure 0, but you can't start from nothing, yet 0 is still a number. This actually pertains awesome to time. I first asked ChatGPT how the other day before stream. I asked ChatGPT, how many years has it been since Julius Caesar was murdered? Well, if he was murdered in 44 BC and this is the year 2025, do the math. 44 plus 2025, right? You get 2069. However, I literally copied and pasted and put the same exact prompt into Grok. And Grok said, well, it's 2068 years because you can't count 0 as being a thing, because mathematically you can't start from nothing. Okay, well, yes and no. Maybe mathematically I can't start, but that's still the beginning. I might be 1, but at some point in the beginning I was nothing. So what am I talking about? Time perspective. In the beginning, there's nothing. But see, the reason why ChatGPT was right and not Grok is because in measuring time, we do count 0. 0 is, if in our Christian calendar we measure it as the time of Jesus' birth, then Jesus was born 2025 years ago. Because that's the starting point, and there was, which is 0, and then there was the in-between point of the 12 months of the year is the 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and so on, all the way until you get to the whole number of 1. So if we start from Jesus' birth, he will be 0. Then the few months of him being an infant would be all the way until the age of 1 would be the time between 0 and 1. Decimal points. That is the same thing. The same thing is that it's the same thing mathematically. And this is why we can count 0 from our perspective, is because there is a 0 in our perspective of time. 0 is really 0, without a doubt. And if you're looking at it, because we measure it as 0, as him being the start of the universe, as of their time frame of our calendar, which means that there was nothing before him, or that there was, it's just that concept wasn't before him. He didn't exist before 0. That's why 0 is able to exist, because there was nothing before him from his perspective, and then he existed, and the world began because he was able to perceive it. From our perspective, that's how all babies perceive the world. It doesn't exist until they open their eyes and they're able to perceive the world around them. That's the universe that we live in. Perspective. Measurement. I'm measuring time as it goes by, but from my perspective, it's not the same thing. Think about that bird flying overhead at our pristine beach that we talked about earlier. Now imagine the bird diving into the water, catching a fish, and lifting it up into the air and flying away and eating the fish. Well, what would you do? Oh, I'm sorry. Imagine him eating the fish, but now go back to the beginning. The bird was just flying overhead, chilling. You were micro measuring its wings, you were micro measuring its flapping. And then, if you closely pay attention and you look at the bird, you'll see that just before the bird descended, it may have arched its neck. It may have curved its body in some sort of way to stop it from flying from here and diving down to here. But the bird was also doing measurement of its own in its own brain, because the fish is also moving. So the bird has to judge from its perspective how fast and how deep the fish is. So it needs to, when it's doing that, it's looking at the light and taking that in and using it to measure along to see where the fish is going. Your brain is now telling you the future. This is a fact, because you're estimating, the bird is estimating where that fish is going to be when it hits the water and reaches in its beak or its talons or however it's going to grab it. From its perspective, it's literally projecting itself into the future. We as humans do this all the time. Every time you think about the possible outcome of a situation, you're literally projecting yourself into the future. Because time doesn't exist. It's all on your perspective. So if I were to perceive, say I was dating a girl and the girl broke up with me, and I don't even know where I was going with this point. Let's see. Let's think of a better point. But it's all how you begin to perceive it. So it doesn't exist. Everything is all, see, we keep jumping right to the same time. Everything is all perspective and measurement, down to the microscopic second, down to the big second. But it's also down to the hour. But it's also, your brain is literally constantly putting itself forwards in time whenever you project something, and you're constantly putting yourself backwards in time whenever you remember something. Because you're not witnessing it now. The light is not reflecting your eyes now, but you're replaying the video now in your brain, that the video was made previously from light hitting your eyes. So in your brain, you're remembering something. You may remember their exact movements, how everything's going. Salsa dance, think about your first salsa dance or something, or dancing in general. The first thing you do is you start to measure how long it's going to take and how they perceive you. So and then while you're doing it, you remember that you've never danced before. And so you start to perceive how, based on that memory of the past, you start to perceive that maybe this salsa dance won't go too well because, as time has shown in the past, I'm a terrible dancer. And then you remember those 8 or 10 other times you danced and you were just absolutely awful. So this time you can logically predict that this dance will be no less terrible, if not more terrible. And it might even be less terrible, but you could logically predict based on prior experience that it's not it's terrible. For example, think about shooting a target in an open field range, right? You got to account for wind direction and all of that and measurement, but you wouldn't know that unless you learned that in the past. Otherwise, you would just point and shoot and think you got your target when you really didn't. So, and somebody else had to learn that and then teach it to you, and then you remembered it and passed it down. It's the same thing with anybody. Think about when you first learned to cook or did something. Am I conjuring up memories in your head? Good. I hope you realize that you're time traveling back in time and from whatever happened at that time in your perspective. And then based on that information, you start to calculate the further. That same bird from our analogy may have dove down 100 times and we only see this one today, but maybe they dove down 100 times and they every time they landed and missed it, well, by the 100th time, the bird probably realized, gee, I need to aim a little further ahead because the fish isn't where I was looking at it 18 seconds ago. It's in a new spot. So I got to aim where it's possibly going. So that bird is traveling through time in its brain. It may not literally be traveling through time, but it's projecting its mind into the future. Well, what if you could project yourself into alternate realities? You know, I've always thought about that, and it's a concept that might be possible. You see, the other day, I killed a spider. Big motherfucker. And I was like joking around to myself and I was like, haha, bitch. Like, fuck you, spider. I'm a immortal god because I have power over your life and death. And my brain thought that I laughed because from the spider's perspective, I am an immortal god. I do have. I literally am an immortal being or a god from that spider's perspective because I have the power over life and death, and this spider does not. And you say, well, the spider kills and stuff. Well, the spider doesn't really actually kill. It kind of just traps its things. You know, other animals kill, but it's all out of necessity for life, for survival, for food. It's not really, you know, it's not like where humans can choose to kill something or not. It's not a choice of life and death like that. It's totally different. And so, you know, like those, and maybe that's the difference. That's why we perceive ourselves as being different from nature. Even though we are of nature and the same nature that created everything else on this planet, maybe that's why we perceive ourselves as different from nature, because we have the power to choose life and death. I could even choose to eat or not eat and starve or not starve if I wanted to. I could choose all these different things. Maybe that's the difference. These animals and insects, they hunt other animals and insects and they fight out of compulsion and they do all these things based off of instinct, but instinct is basically just compulsion and all of that. So it's maybe that's the difference between us. Maybe maybe that's what makes us different from all the other beings on the planet, because we're able to choose what we want to do in life and death. We're not completely driven by compulsions and genetic upbringings and all of that, where we have a choice. Maybe that is why alternate dimensions exist, because we had a choice. I've talked about in previous episodes how the reason why I can predict the future is not really why I'm predicting the future. I'm not actually out here predicting the future for you. I'm is sound alerts not totally not, yeah, we need to fix our fucking thing. The reason why, from my perspective, I can predict the future is because through logic and knowledge and previous things, you can pretty much break down any situation into three possible outcomes. It did, it didn't, or maybe but. Meaning, yes, this definitely happened, no, this didn't happen, and maybe it happened, however, something else also happened in order to change that. So, for example, I might, um, I might, this fucking idiot gonna make me fucking delete shit. I gotta fucking block that shit. Anyway, so I might, either I'm gonna go and, let's say I went to the store, right? And let's give it a simple, simple explanation. Let's say I went to the store and I decided I wanted some iced tea, right? Well, there might be another perspective where I didn't buy iced tea, I bought beer. And there might be another perspective where I didn't buy any. Those are three different time frames that could have existed. And what could have happened because of that? Maybe I bought the beer, had a few, and then realized, oh shit, I was supposed to go there, and I didn't realize I had too many, and I drove and crashed, right? Or what if I just had the iced tea, and I get home, and the iced tea is leaking everywhere. There's holes in the cans. What if I do neither of those and save the money for something else? Those are three possible perspectives, but pretty much those are the most likely to exist from my perspective in my own life. For example, you might go to the store and say, I'm going to go and buy beer, one, or iced tea, or an alternate dimension exists where I buy both beer and iced tea. I go home, I have the iced tea, I do my things, I go out, and then I come home later at night and drink the beer. That's a totally different concept from somebody else's perspective. Or it could have been my own perspective. But the point is that everything is about choice that you make. I choose to do this, and because of that, this and this and this happens. And because of those things happening, another thing happens. It's like a web. You know, as soon as one thing happens, another thing is caused by that. It's cause and effect. So if you understand the cause and effect by your perspective and potentially can understand it by other people's perspective, you can predict the future. But the question is can I use my time traveling brain to perceive another dimension? The answer might actually be yes. For example, let's take that beer and iced tea analogy again. Let's say I bought some beer and I get home later and I decided, gee, you know, I should have got that iced tea, man. I should have had the iced tea. I should have got both. You know, let's see. Well, what if I say to myself, well, what if I did get both? How would the universe go? Maybe I jumped into that time frame where because I decided to purchase both instead of just one, I entered into that alternate dimension where I bought both and lived a different life. Well, I'm not really in that life yet, but I can imagine it because it's not so far fetched to imagine yourself in the same world that you're in right now, but you decided on buying iced tea instead of beer. Well, you could imagine that because it's very simple. It's hot outside. You decided you want some iced tea. You grab the iced tea out of the fridge, and there it is. You know, and you go back to work or back to whatever you were doing. So you can imagine the universe from another perspective, another time frame of what happened. Well, if you could do that, you could potentially travel through time because you can then start to imagine what happens after. Because seeing the universe and what happens after something else happens is just measuring two events next to each other, and time is measured by the in between those events from the start and finish of each event, and how long each event is occurring together. So if one event is 1 minute and the other event is 2 minutes, I know that I have a total of 3 minutes for both events. So if I were to, you know, go to the store and buy the beer, later regret it, imagine myself getting the iced tea, and then being able to do all these things because I was drinking only iced tea and my brain wasn't affected by beer. And so you could logically, through your own experience and through your intuition, plan out how the universe would be and what would happen in the future based on your past actions and your current understanding of your perspective of the universe. All together, it translates to time is your illusion inside your own brain. And the reason why you see time as a concept and as a constant is because your brain is constantly putting those microscopic bits of information into the video to give your brain more detail. It's why you can see, if you open up your eyes and the light is there and it's a sunny day, you know that there's a tree outside and you're looking at it, but you can't really see each of the individual leaves. Then as the light reflects into your eyes and your brain adjusts, you start to see each individual leaf and each individual shape of the leaf. and then you see the tree more clearly. Your brain has built on information. Same thing if I were to go back inside, and it's dark inside. My brain has just received all that light, and I can't see shit in here in the dark because all that light is still in my brain. From my perspective, it's even darker than it would be. And then for the person who's been sitting inside that dark room for days or weeks or months, because because from my perspective, I just went from all that light and energy to devoid of light and energy. So the universe is an illusion based on your brain's measurement of time and space. It's an illusion based on the amount of light and energy received by your brain, and how your brain puts all that information together. And that amalgamation of time measured together is what gives us the concept of the flow. Otherwise, you would perceive the universe as being like a blocky type of universe where you would see every movement as being very rigid and thing, because your brain is viewing each microsecond on a larger scale. But if it's on a nanoscale and your brain is understanding those things, you perceive it as one big flow. I perceive it as one big movement of my hand, even if it's not moving that way, because my brain is taking all of the micro information and putting it together as part of the main video. It's like adding a soundtrack to the movie. The movie is awesome, but once you bring in that guy to play some crazy music or whatever for the show, it's suddenly, all of a sudden, way better because you've changed the perspective of everything. Time doesn't exist. I firmly believe that time does not exist, and everything is a total illusion based on reality, based on your version of reality, each individual person's version of reality and their experience and all of that. Time doesn't exist because it's simply a measurement. Even a larger planet who has a larger force on gravity than our planet does, that force of gravity is that force of gravity alters our perception of time. And our change in being alters our perception of time. Everything changes. Everything. But time does not exist simply because it is a perception, and because it is a measurement of the brain based on observation. So I might go to another planet and think that the universe is older because I observe, based on my perspective, that we're moving fast through time, so the universe must be, moving fast through time also. But if I get to a different planet and I start measuring there, I'm not going to say it's 1 year on that planet and I get to the planet and I'm only 1 year old, because I've only been on this planet for a year. And even still, an Earth year is not the same years on that planet. So let's say it was 5 years difference, right? So for every 1 year on Earth, I age 5 years on this planet, right? Or every 5 years on this planet, I age 1 year, while every 1 year on Earth, I age 1 year. Every 5 years on this planet, I age 1 year on Earth. This is how the gods were able to do it, because they were from a different planet. They would go to a planet, they would go to this planet, and they would appear to be immortal because they appeared not to age, because they lived differently from their perspective. Their planet had a different gravity, a different rotation, a different revolution around the sun. Everything was different. So from their perspective, 5,000 years might be 1 year to us. And we look at them and we see, wow, they are immortal. They live forever. They are 5,000 years old. But no, he's only 1 year old. But from your perspective, he's 5,000 years old. Everything is well, these gods, they all talk about how when they had the demigods here, those born of human and godlike children, they talk about how it was funny that the demigods did not have the same time perspective as the regular gods. So also, the children of the gods who came here to this earth did not, who were born here on this earth, did not have the same lifespan as the ones who were born on the home planet. So there was a rule that they had to be born, that children had to be born on the home planet. Interestingly enough, not conceived on the home planet, born on the home planet. And then being born on the home planet, they would know that they they had the same concept of time as the gods did, as their parents did. And so that concept of time became their rule, their law, their everything. And then time literally what am I getting at? I'm losing my train of thought for a second. It's so interesting that they would do that, because it implies that they knew that time as a measurement was all perspective. So, because if they're able to be born here on Earth, they're able to be born on the home planet, then there's no difference between the two or between the planets. So why was it so important? Well, because from their perspective, that child of a god needed to be able to look out into the world and age 1 year and live a lot longer. Otherwise, if they were only lived to, let's say, the age of 77 on this planet, which is our current average age range of people, they lived on 70 to 77, and but their parents lived thousands more years. How terrible would that be for you? Lose your kids simply because they had a different time perspective than you, born on a different planet than you? I mean, that's pretty ridiculous, yet it was probably true. It's probably exactly what happened. And so they literally decided to only have the children on the home planet, because the children needed to be born and needed to be viewed as immortal like the parents. So we hear these stories about the half gods who are not immortal, born on this earth. We call them the demigods. And those beings were, I'm gonna itch my leg, and those beings were not immortal. But from their perspective and their frame of reference from their planet, projected to us, makes us think that they are immortal. So, time does not exist. It's all a measurement and perspective. Time as a flowing constant is a complete and total illusion. These are the points we touched on today. I'd like to thank every one of you for joining in this morning. If you're listening later on, have a great and wonderful week. Don't forget to follow on X for immediate updates and on everything that we do. We'll see you Thursday for games, Saturday for the podcast, and yeah, I love y'all. Thanks for chilling with me. We're gonna get out of here, and I got work to do and all that stuff. So much love. I hope y'all have an amazing day, amazing week, and we'll see you next week for episode 59. And I'm super excited. Hopefully we can finish fixing our technical difficulties. And much love, y'all. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Don't forget to check out the website also. I appreciate it. We're going to have new things coming out, more books coming out. I'm almost done with one of the stories. So we'll have a lot of fun. Much love, y'all.